everyone! Welcome to Gender Spectrum's Dimensions of Gender series. My name's Eden and I'm a member of the Gender Spectrum Youth Council. At Gender Spectrum, we believe that a person's gender is the complex relationship between three dimensions: body, identity, and expression. But what do these dimensions mean? How do they relate to one another? And how can they look different for different people? Each video in this series will explore one of the dimensions. You'll meet other members of the Gender Spectrum Youth Council who will explain the dimension and what it means and looks like for them. Enjoy!
Hi, my name is Violet, I'm 18 and I use they/them pronouns. Gender is a social construct, something our society created because it was useful. It describes the way we feel about ourselves and how we fit into society. Gender is the relationship between three dimensions: your body, expression, and identity. Today we'll be talking about identity, our deeply held internal sense of self. Your gender identity is how you personally feel you fit into the gender system. Are you a girl, a boy, agender, gender fluid, something else? Only you can know what your gender identity is. I choose words to describe my gender by seeing how they feel. I ask myself if they resonate with me and go from there. There's no objective way to determine gender. I can't say, girls are X, do Y, and have Z. I'm X, I do Y, and I have Z, so I'm a girl. What matters is how you feel personally. There's a lot of pressure to be able to find the perfect gender label, such as boy or bigender, that you can then recite for people so they know exactly who you are. In practice, I found that rarely works well. Your internal self may or may not change, the definitions of the words we use will definitely change. Your mileage may vary. Ultimately, you know who you are on the inside, and you get to decide how you talk about your identity or whether you label it at all. It's also important to extend that autonomy to other people and not make assumptions about their identities. Gender identity is not determined by someone's body, and it's not determined by someone's presentation or expression, although those both might interact with someone's gender identity. Other factors that can affect how we see our gender identities are race or cultural background, age, sexual orientation, disability, etc. For example, a white, bisexual, gender-fluid person might experience and see their gender somewhat differently from an African-American, lesbian, gender-fluid person. Someone can use the same or a similar term for their gender identity as you, but have a very different relationship to their gender, which is why it's important that you don't generalize. At the end of the day, there's no way to know what someone's gender identity is unless they tell you. That's why it doesn't make sense to assume other people's genders. There's no way to know unless you ask. I describe my gender mostly by saying I'm a butch lesbian or a gender non-conforming lesbian. At other points in my life, I identified as agender, bigender, gender fluid, or a demigirl, depending on when you ask me. You may or may not know this, but our gender and our sexual orientation aren't the same thing. So then why do I include the word lesbian as a part of my gender identity? Well, embracing being a lesbian was really important for me to be able to figure out my gender. I used to cycle rapidly through words trying to find one that could describe my gender perfectly, but I was unsuccessful. Once I realized I was a lesbian, I started learning more about the history of lesbian culture. I realized that lesbians have always pushed the boundaries of gender nonconformity, and as a result, I felt less pressure to categorize myself in a way that was easier for other people to understand. There aren't words that can fully describe me yet, and that's okay. Reading the writing of lesbians like Leslie Feinberg and Audre Lorde, people like me, helped me understand how I relate to myself, to others, and to our culture in general, even without labeling my personal identity.
Hey everybody, I'm Emily, I'm 14 years old, and I use they/them pronouns. I'm also part of the Gender Spectrum Youth Council. The term I most identify with currently is gender fluid. To me, this identity is how my gender dial reads my gender spectrum each day. For example, one day I can feel completely male and another day completely female. I decided upon this gender identity when I realized that my gender dial fluctuates, rather than staying in place. I don't always feel the same gender, and I can jump from one end to the opposite end of the spectrum. I came across this term first at my local LGBTQ+ center. Someone told me that they were gender fluid and explained to me what that was. I, at the time, thought I was only a trans woman. And, well, I read a book on it, on being gender fluid, that is. And I thought that analogies used, such as dial or compass, always described me. And this made me feel completely accepted and understanding. And I didn't feel like I was in that common confused or denial phase. This book is also what inspired me to reach out to other people relating to my feelings and also help others feel accepted and less confused about their identity. If you can't think of a label for yourself, that is completely okay and normal. Your identity grows over some time. Some people will never find a comfortable label for themselves in their lifetime. But this does not mean that you are confused, unsure, or wrong. Your identity is how you feel on the inside, regardless of labels or what other people think. You are whatever you feel internally. Gender is also one piece of your identity. The other parts include, but are not limited to, preferences and orientation. Still have questions about the identity dimension? Or maybe you want to share what identity currently works for you. Reach out to me on the Gender Spectrum Lunch in the teen group at genderspectrum.org/lunch. I'll be there as well as other members of the Gender Spectrum Youth Council and tons of other teens who are connecting and sharing experiences. Thank you, and see you.